মনে না করেন আমি ইংলিশেই বলবো। Um, we are all concerned, of course, about what is happening in Bangladesh. We have discussed all the concerns. I would like to go through them a little bit. Obviously, we cannot talk about what is happening in Bangladesh without understanding what happened. And this is a question that comes up all the time. There are many different versions of it. There are most that blame the Awami League. I would like to present what really happened at that time to begin with. You see, we had protests in Bangladesh, which really the student movement, the quota demands, they were not unreasonable. They were a legitimate demand. The old quota, it was frankly quite archaic and didn't make sense. However, our government, the fact that most people don't know is that our government had removed those quotas years ago. It was the courts that reinstated those quotas based on a case by the families of freedom fighters. Where our government failed was in the communication and the messaging. We did not say anything about it at all. We left it up to the courts. And this let the movement brew. That was failure number one on our part. Then you had the opposition, the Islamists, and even our good old CIA jump in, turn the movement violent. You had militants who were armed start attacking police stations. And if you listen to the audio recordings of my mother that were presented in court, you hear the discussions about armed militants attacking police stations. And at that point, the situation became violent. There were innocent protesters, innocent civilians that were hurt. All deaths are regrettable. Our government did not want any deaths, but it happened. The violence was initiated by the militants, not by the government. Anyhow, we are here today to talk about the future, the current situation. You've seen in the past year and a half, we've had an unelected regime holding on to power without any mandate. Not just that, one of the first things this regime did was release all convicted terrorists from prison. These were terrorists who had been convicted of attacks such as the attacks on the Holy Artisan Bakery in 2016, of the killing of bloggers, of the killing of a local US Embassy staff member. Our Awami League government hunted them down, arrested them, tried them, sentenced them to jail. But this regime released them. And why did they do that? Because this regime is backed by the Islamists, by the extremists. They form the nucleus. I've been asked this again, do you think the protesters were Islamists and militants? No, the protesters themselves weren't Islamists and militants. But the Islamists and militants jumped in behind the protests because they have been on television in Bangladesh, on Facebook, taking credit that if we did not cause violence, if we did not kill the police, if we did not burn down structures, the revolution would never have succeeded. They have said that openly. And so then Yunus and the regime, they owe a favor to the Islamists. They are backed by the Islamists, and the current regime in Bangladesh is essentially an Islamist regime. The Islamists are already in power in Bangladesh. They try to defer blame for the violence on mob justice. Yunus's own spokesperson refers to them as pressure groups. So they exert pressure on behalf of the government for the government's agenda by beating people up and killing them. Judges, if you don't rule the way we want, we will surround your house and threaten to beat you up. Anyone who speaks against us, including the media, we will beat you up, burn down your media house. It happened right during August of 2024. Several progressive television and news outlets were burnt down. And more recently, the two largest dailies, the Prothom Alo and Daily Star, their offices were set on fire. Now you have elections. You have everyone, many people within the country sort of have a sense of relief that if the elections happen, at least we will be saved from this regime. But what is the reality of the situation? The reality of the situation is that they blame the Awami League. We have to ban the Awami League because the Awami League kills students. I take full responsibility for that. Many students, innocent people died during the protests. But many police officers, many of our own activists were also killed. The UN report lists 1,400 killed, but the UN report includes hundreds killed from August 5th to August 15th. 10 days after, for 10 days after our regime, after our government was no longer in power. Those were our activists. Those were police officers. The UN report, in a blanket statement, blames even the killing of police officers and the Awami League's own activists on the Awami League when the Awami League was no longer in power. That is how ridiculous the situation is. But anyhow, our government had promised, my mother herself had promised justice. Our government had formed a judicial committee to investigate all killings, the killings by police, the killings of the police, the killings of all civilians, all party activists, regardless of party. Our government did not give indemnity to anyone. We promised justice. This regime, of course, immediately issued an ordinance granting immunity to anyone for the killing of all police officers, all Awami League activists, anything else, because now they blame mob justice, not, that those killings were justified, so those who conducted those killings are above the law. That is the situation that we are heading into an election. And of course, these elections, they blame the Awami League, so they banned it. There's a de facto ban on the Awami League. However, there is really an in effect ban on all progressive parties. It is a two-horse race, just BNP and Jamaat-e-Islam. Jatiyo Party, the third largest party in the country, their offices have been burnt down. Many of their leaders are behind bars. Many of their leaders' homes have been burned down. They are not allowed to conduct any election activity, speak in public. Other smaller parties, all progressive parties, are being suppressed. This is a very, very one-sided election. This is not really an election at all. And what are the likely outcomes of this election? On one hand, you have the BNP, which is one of the largest parties in Bangladesh. Sooner or later, the BNP would have come to power. That was inevitable, which is fine. However, here is a point to note. You see, why is the US Embassy and the US State Department championing BNP and Tariq Rahman so much? There's a very simple reason for that. You see, Tariq Rahman was convicted based on evidence provided by FBI agents who had traveled to Bangladesh to testify against him in court. So the US has plenty of evidence to charge him with corruption and other things. They have chosen not to do that. Why? Because they have that in their hand. Under US law, the US takes upon itself the power that they can charge any foreign person in any country, including a head of state, and go arrest them. They have done that several times in Panama, even recently in Venezuela. I'm not debating whether those people deserved it or not, but the fact is the US can do that. So what does that make the BNP? That, you see, until recently, the BNP had vehemently opposed this referendum which would, without representation, change the constitution of our country. You see, our constitution has no scope for a referendum. Our courts have ruled that the referendums the military dictators held in the 80s and 90s were unconstitutional. Yet this regime is trying to hold a referendum again, even though it's not in the constitution. Courts have ruled that the referendums are unconstitutional, because that is the only way they can legitimately try to legitimize amending the constitution. And of course, in order to amend the constitution, you have to have a 2/3 majority. Well, if it was a fair election, it's almost impossible for one party to win a 2/3 majority on its own. There would have to be compromise. In this scenario, there isn't. So what you have now is Tariq Rahman and the BNP, who for months had vehemently campaigned against this referendum, just a few days ago, made a complete turnaround and said, yes, vote for yes for the referendum. Until now, they had been telling their voters to vote no. Just a few days ago, Tariq Rahman himself announced, vote yes. Why? Because the Americans really want this referendum. The State Department really wants this referendum. Why? It weakens the powers of the prime minister. It weakens the government. It makes a single party government almost impossible, so that there would always be a coalition government in Bangladesh, which would always be a weak government that can be controlled. And Tariq Rahman at this point really has to follow the bidding of the US Embassy in Bangladesh, and even when he's prime minister, he will have to continue to do that, because if not, the US can always bring up the corruption charges against him and simply arrest him from Bangladesh and put him in prison in the United States. This really is the dream scenario for the US State Department, to have a prime minister whom they have that much control over that they can arrest anytime and bring to their prison, in which case he cannot dare go outside anything they ask. On the other hand, you have Jamaat. Now, mind you, historically, Jamaat has never had much of a vote base. Jamaat polls at 5 to 10% in the country. They have 5 to 10% vote throughout the constituencies, but they have very few stronghold constituencies. If the Awami League were running, Jamaat would be confined to 5, maybe 10% of the seats. Even without the Awami League running, their poll numbers are at about 17%. So 10 to 15% of the seats is the maximum that Jamaat can hope to achieve with all parties running, which is why it was really critical for this regime that is backed by Jamaat to ban the Awami League. Their polls conducted by everyone else, showed that BNP wasn't really gaining in popularity. BNP stuck at about 20%. Jamaat is stuck 15 to 20%. That's only 40 or so percent of the vote. There's over half the country that is either undecided, or in the last few polls, almost 18, 20% refuse to say who they're going to vote for. Now, why are these people refusing to say? Because there's such a climate of fear that if they say they want to vote for the Awami League, they are likely to be attacked. And even in this climate of fear, 11% said they would vote for the Awami League, which is why it was critical for this regime to ban the largest progressive party, because there was actually a possibility that the Awami League, in a free and fair election, the Awami League might actually win. They could not take that risk. So now Jamaat is hoping that because they are within a few percent of the BNP, that perhaps if they can rig the elections a little bit, they can come to power. You've already seen this regime, for the first time in the history of Bangladesh, has allowed postal votes. Now, why have we not done postal votes in Bangladesh before? Because in Bangladesh, unlike other countries, it is very, very difficult to verify postal votes. You have no idea where those votes went, who filled them out, who sent them back. They're just tied to an NID number. And already there have been many videos that have surfaced online of thousands and thousands of postal votes, especially in Middle Eastern countries, at one location being opened and being pre-filled for Jamaat and for yes in the referendum by groups of people. That is what is the reality. And why use postal votes? Because if you do regular ballot stuffing during election day, it's too visible. Too many cameras, too many journalists. That will be too noticeable. Postal ballots, foreign observers have no insight. Journalists don't get to see. They have nothing. They just get the count from the election commission, and they have to believe it. So finally, we have the issue of what happens if Jamaat comes to power. Well, regardless of whether Jamaat comes to power or not, without the Awami League and the progressive parties, Jamaat is going to gain. Jamaat is going to gain outside influence in Bangladesh, which they would have no chance of otherwise. From where they might have had 10, 15, 20 seats maximum, now who knows? They are going to perform far beyond what their actual popularity will allow. You have heard Jamaat Samir recently made derogatory comments against women. They have done that repeatedly. Their charter calls for the establishment of an Islamic state based on Sharia law. That is Jamaat's goal. You see, the one thing people don't understand, as Muslims, you see, we are normal people. Most Muslims, moderate Muslims, when we talk about our opinions, when we form a political party, we base it on our political beliefs, that we are liberal, we are conservative. We don't espouse religion, just like other countries. You don't espouse that you are a religious party unless your goal is to establish governance based on religious law. That's sort of pointless unless you are an extremist. There is no reason for that. The only reason, there is no such thing as a moderate Islamist party. The fact that they are Islamists means they want Sharia law. And that is Jamaat's goal. You have seen this regime that is backed by Jamaat release all terrorists. You have had Al-Qaeda operatives known to the US, known to all foreign intelligence operating freely in Bangladesh under this regime. You have had Lakhshay-Taliban commanders speak at public rallies in Bangladesh. That is what is happening. And for India, this should be very, very alarming. That regardless of whether BNP comes to power or not, Jamaat is going to have outside influence. And the BNP regime is going to be a puppet of the US Embassy. So Jamaat is going to have a complete free hand to do whatever they want. Pakistan is going to have a free hand to do whatever they want in Bangladesh. And this has some very, very serious security implications for India, for its eastern border. Now, many in this government, in the Indian government, of course, feel that they're doing their best, but it's not possible. It may not, these elections are impossible to stop. Well, the fact is, the international community now needs to denounce these elections as not free and fair. Not just because the Awami League is banned, but because all progressive parties are banned. They have a, in effect, ban. This is not an election. This is a show. And if you allow this show to move forward, if you allow this to happen, if you do not denounce it ahead of time as unfair, that not unacceptable, then they are going to go ahead. And you are going to have a stage-managed government. After that, what will happen to Bangladesh becomes very murky. How long that will continue? Again, impossible to predict. The Awami League itself is not going anywhere. The Awami League has 40% of the vote bank. We are the party of independence, the people that believe in progressiveness, liberalization, in the spirit of liberation, are tens of millions of voters. They're not going to change their mind overnight. Not even in a few years, it takes decades. But in the meantime, for those 5, 10 years, what is Bangladesh going to become like? On one hand, you will have a weak government that is a foreign puppet. And on the other hand, you will have Islamists bringing in terrorists, conducting Islamic terrorist activity, trying to impose Sharia law. Minorities will be persecuted. Minorities will be fleeing the country. This is something that Jamaat, this is something that's been ongoing throughout. The only time in Bangladesh's history when minorities were absolutely safe, were the most safe, were the 17 years of the Awami League government. The only time in Bangladesh's history when Bangladesh was free from terrorism were the 17 years of the Awami League. The only time in India's history when its eastern borders were safe from insurgency from Bangladesh was during the Awami League's 17 years. These are facts. So I would like to thank the authors of this book for bringing out many of these facts to light. I would like to thank you in the audience for coming here to listen to me, to my message. And I would like to appeal to the international community that if you do not speak out against these elections now, where there's less than 11 days to go, worrying about voter turnout is irrelevant because they are stuffing numbers, the voter numbers, through postal ballots. They're intimidating voters to force them to go vote. That is what is happening in Bangladesh today. So the voter numbers are going to be inflated from reality regardless because of millions of postal votes, billions of fake postal votes. So that is my appeal. If you want security in Bangladesh, and again, this is not on behalf of the Awami League. If the people of Bangladesh, you believe they don't like the Awami League anymore, that's fine. Then let them vote against the Awami League. Why fear the Awami League running in the elections then? I'm not afraid of that. But this is your last chance to do something. This is your last chance to prevent Jamaat-e-Islam becoming a major force in Bangladeshi politics. This Islamism, radical Islam, and terrorism from becoming a major force in Bangladeshi politics for at least the next 5 to 10 years, perhaps even longer. This is really your last chance. I would like to thank you all again. I appreciate all the efforts that everyone here has put in, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak. Joi Bangla.